So friends, how are you? Today, to understand the Muslim world and its foreign alliances in depth, we continue with our detailed series. We had reached the point of Kuwait under Iraqi occupation at a critical moment when American forces had already landed in Saudi Arabia. This period marked a significant shift in regional politics. Iraq and Saudi Arabia, despite their earlier differences, now found themselves in a situation where they needed help from their former enemy, Iran. And interestingly, Iran also needed their cooperation and support. This was a period of strategic realignment because Iran had undergone substantial internal and external changes and was now ready to engage diplomatically and militarily, albeit cautiously. But what exactly had changed in Iran? After the death of Ayatollah Khomeini, a significant transformation took place within the Iranian political landscape and society. The Iranian population, who had endured the harsh realities of the 8-year war with Iraq, had grown weary of conflict. Ordinary citizens realized that continuous war only drained resources and caused suffering. They started to understand that aggression was no longer beneficial, and that maintaining diplomatic and friendly relations with neighboring countries could provide stability and allow the nation to progress economically and socially. In 1989, during the presidential elections in Iran, the people overwhelmingly voted for Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani. Rafsanjani was seen as a mature, pragmatic leader. He was not of a warlike temperament, but focused on internal development, economic progress, and the restoration of diplomatic relations with neighboring states. This shift in leadership and public sentiment had a profound effect not only internally, but also on Iran's relations with Saudi Arabia, which had been tense for years, partly due to incidents during the Hajj pilgrimage and other political disagreements. Rafsanjani took active steps to repair these strained ties through careful, behind-the-scenes diplomacy, demonstrating Iran's willingness to reconcile with its neighbors. Friends, it is important to understand that as Iran and Saudi Arabia began these cautious steps towards rapprochement, the geopolitical situation in the Gulf was extremely tense. Saddam Hussein had occupied Kuwait, a relatively small and economically vital nation, creating a regional crisis. Kuwait had lost its independence and was in urgent need of allies. Saudi Arabia, despite internal challenges, emerged as a natural ally due to its geographical proximity and resources. Iraq, meanwhile, found itself in a complex position, needing both diplomatic and financial support to consolidate its gains. Saddam Hussein had to navigate the delicate balance of power, as he had previously been in direct conflict with Iran. Saddam Hussein's strategic approach was nuanced. Upon arriving in Saudi Arabia, he prioritized sending a delegation to Tehran to apologize to Iran for Iraq's past aggression during the 8-year war. This marked a critical diplomatic maneuver, as Iran was no longer under the leadership of Khomeini, who had passed away in 1989. The new supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, now guided Iran's domestic and foreign policy, emphasizing strategic caution and political pragmatism. The delegation's visit demonstrated Iran's willingness to resolve disputes diplomatically rather than through military confrontation. During this period, Iran issued a formal demand for Saddam Hussein to withdraw his forces immediately from territories it considered under its influence. At that time, Iran controlled nearly 2,500 square kilometers of disputed land, and approximately 300,000 Iraqi troops were stationed on the border. Saddam Hussein intended to move these troops to the Saudi-Kuwait border to counter the incoming American forces. However, this posed a severe dilemma. Engaging in a two-front conflict, one against Iran to reclaim territory and the other against U.S.-backed forces in Saudi Arabia, was beyond the capabilities of Iraq's military and economic resources. Consequently, Saddam Hussein opted for a strategic withdrawal and chose to cooperate with Saudi Arabia and Kuwait instead. It is crucial to remember the depth of the hostility that existed previously. Just 2 years ago, Saddam Hussein had openly denounced Iranians, labeling them an inferior race. Iraqi generals considered Iranians as vermin and even advocated for the use of chemical weapons against them. This long-standing hatred had roots in centuries of conflict. However, by this period, the dynamics had shifted entirely. Nations that once sought the destruction of Iran now seeking friendship. This transformation illustrates a key principle in geopolitics. In the struggle for power, permanent friends and enemies rarely exist. Religion, ethnicity, and sectarian affiliations often take a back seat to strategic interests. Leaders manipulate public sentiment and emotions to achieve national objectives, balancing diplomacy, military action, and public opinion. On August 16, 1999, Saddam Hussein sent a high-level delegation to Tehran carrying a letter addressed to Iranian President Rafsanjani, offering to return occupied territories, release Iranian prisoners, and restore diplomatic relations. This move emphasized Iran's preference for diplomacy over military confrontation and was considered a major success by the Iranian government. Following this diplomatic exchange, Iraqi forces vacated Iranian-held areas, marking the restoration of territorial sovereignty and improving bilateral relations. Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia, the presence of American forces remained a significant factor. Iran, while improving relations with its neighbors, issued warnings that fighting against American forces was a religious obligation. Thousands of Iranian citizens demonstrated in Tehran, chanting slogans against U.S. intervention. These protests were significant because they reflected public sentiment against foreign military presence, even as Iran engaged in careful diplomacy with neighboring Arab nations. Despite these tensions, Arab nations continued to strengthen ties with Iran diplomatically, while simultaneously preparing militarily against Iraq. Saddam Hussein's forces, on the other hand, were incentivized to cooperate with Saudi Arabia, receiving financial and strategic compensation in exchange for assistance. Local Saudis rallied to defend their borders, further reinforcing regional solidarity against the Iraqi occupation. By late 1992, the United States had assembled a massive multinational force in Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf. This coalition included approximately 390,000 troops prepared to engage Iraq, of which 220,000 were Muslim forces. Additional European and regional allies supplemented this force, which collectively had 4,000 tanks, 2,900 combat aircraft, thousands of helicopters, and over 100 naval warships. This represented one of the largest concentrations of military power in a single region since World War II. In contrast, Iraq had 545,000 troops with 4,200 tanks, 650 helicopters, and only 555 combat-ready aircraft. On January 16, 1991, coalition forces launched their attack on Iraq from Kuwait in what became known as Operation Desert Storm. The campaign lasted 43 days and involved an unprecedented scale of air and ground operations. Coalition forces conducted over 106,000 targeted airstrikes, dropped 141,000 tons of explosives, and fired numerous cruise missiles. The estimated cost to Iraq was $198 billion, with tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers and civilians killed, along with approximately 5,000 Kuwaiti casualties. Interestingly, parts of Iraq's air force that had relocated to Iran were spared, as Iran did not participate in the conflict. The remaining Iraqi Air Force in Iraq was largely destroyed by coalition forces. For the United States, this marked a significant military success, especially in light of the Vietnam experience 17 years earlier. American casualties were minimal, and the victory greatly enhanced the domestic and international standing of President George H.W. Bush, although economic consequences, especially oil price spikes, followed in the region. In addition, inspections of Iraqi facilities revealed large-scale chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons programs, which prompted Iran to accelerate its own nuclear program as a strategic countermeasure. Friends, these aftershocks did not only affect the U.S. and China, but had significant impacts on Saudi Arabia, as the regional balance of power dramatically shifted. The Gulf War demonstrated the intricate web of alliances, enmities, and pragmatic diplomacy that defines Middle Eastern geopolitics. Leaders strategically balanced public sentiment, military capability, and international pressure to achieve objectives. The war also highlighted how temporary alliances can form even against former adversaries, and how pragmatic decision-making often supersedes ideological or sectarian considerations. This period was not just about military confrontations, but also about the complex interplay of diplomacy, domestic politics, and global power dynamics. The U.S.-led coalition's intervention fundamentally altered the trajectory of Iraq, reshaped Saudi defense policy, and influenced Iran's strategic calculations. Even years later, the consequences of these decisions were evident in regional politics, military preparedness, and international relations. Friends, if you wish to fully understand the dynamics of the Muslim world during this era, watching the series from the start is highly recommended. By following this sequence, you can grasp how historical conflicts, leadership decisions, and strategic alliances have shaped the contemporary Muslim world. This context is essential for understanding the motivations, fears, and ambitions of various nations and